My name is Terrell. I am a Crick scholar, observer of strange species, recorder of mistakes that powerful civilizations make when they think they are very clever. And on that particular afternoon, inside the Grand Hall of Varric's Academy, we were all very clever. Or at least we thought we were. The hall itself was massive. Hundreds of students from dozens of star systems sat around long metal tables. Plates hovered above the surface. Steam rose from food bowls. The smell of roasted kel grain filled the air. And in the far corner sat the girl. The dragon girl. Her name was Lira. Now before you imagine something terrifying, allow me to clarify something. Lira was small. Very small. Barely taller than the table. Thin wings folded behind her shoulders. Bronze scales across her arms. Two curved horns that were far too large for her head. And bright golden eyes that kept moving nervously between the other students. Dragons once ruled half the Orion Arm, terrifying creatures. Cities burned. Fleets destroyed. Legends still circulate. But that was long ago. Now the surviving dragons were, well, poor. Embarrassingly poor. And Lira was the poorest one in the room. Her tray was empty. Completely empty. She sat there pretending to study a datapad that was clearly turned off. Every few seconds her stomach made a small rumbling sound. Several students noticed. Of course they did. The first laugh came from Vaughn. Tall, blue skin, hair like sharp needles. The type of student who thought intelligence meant humiliating someone weaker. He leaned back in his chair. "Look at that," he said loudly. A few heads turned. "Oh no," he continued with dramatic concern. "The mighty Dragon Empire has fallen so far, they can't even afford lunch." More laughter. Lyra's wings tightened. She said nothing, which, naturally, encouraged Vaughn even more. He grabbed a piece of roasted meat from his tray and waved it in the air. "Careful, everyone," he said. "If we don't guard our food, the dragon might breathe fire and steal it." A loud snort came from another table. "That dragon can't even breathe smoke." More laughter. I should explain something about Crick's culture. We observe. We analyze. We rarely interfere. So I simply watched. Because that is what scholars do. Across the hall, another species watched as well. The human. His name was Owen Hale. Humans were new to the Academy. Very new. Their species had only joined the Galactic Union recently. Most of us considered them unpredictable. Not dangerous. Just strange. Owen sat quietly halfway down the hall, eating from a large metal tray. Bread, meat, fruit. Enough food for 2 students. He had brown hair, simple clothing, and the calm expression of someone who was paying attention to everything. He heard the laughter. Everyone heard the laughter. Vaughn leaned toward Lira again. "So, Dragon Girl, where's your lunch?" Silence. "Did you forget your treasure hoard at home?" Another wave of laughter. Lira slowly lowered her head. Her claws tightened around the edge of the table. Her stomach growled again. Loud this time. And that was when something interesting happened. The human stopped eating. He stared at his tray. Then he looked across the hall. Then he stood up. Now, this was unusual. Humans rarely moved during meals unless something was wrong. Owen picked up his tray. The hall slowly became quieter. Students watched him walk between the tables. One by one heads turned, because he was walking directly toward the dragon girl. Vaughn noticed too. "Oh look," he said loudly. "The new species wants a closer view of extinction." A few snickers. Owen said nothing. He stopped beside Lyra's table. For a moment, she didn't even look up. Then a shadow fell across the surface. She raised her eyes slowly. The human looked down at her. And then, something even stranger happened. He knelt. Actually knelt on the floor, beside her chair. Now, if you're unfamiliar with human body language, kneeling is not common among them. The entire hall went silent. Even the kitchen drones paused. Owen placed his tray on the table in front of Lira. Not half. The entire tray. Bread, meat, fruit, all of it. He looked directly at her and spoke in a calm voice. "Share a meal with me." Just like that. Simple. No sarcasm. No performance. Just an invitation. Lira blinked. Her wings twitched. "I can't," she whispered. Her voice was quiet and rough. Owen tilted his head slightly. "Why not?" She looked around the hall. Every student was staring now. They're watching. He glanced back at the crowd, then shrugged. Yeah. Pause. So, several students chuckled awkwardly. Lira looked down at the food again. Her stomach betrayed her once more with a loud rumble. Owen pretended not to notice. Instead, he tore a piece of bread and placed it gently in front of her. No fire required, he said casually. It's already cooked. A few students laughed, but the tone had changed. Not cruel this time. Lira hesitated. Then slowly, very slowly, she picked up the bread. She took a bite. Her eyes widened immediately. Dragons burn enormous amounts of energy. Even a young one requires large quantities of food, and Lira had clearly not eaten properly in days. She finished the bread piece in seconds. Owen pushed the tray closer. Go ahead. She didn't ask again. The dragon girl began eating. Carefully at first, then faster. Not messy, just hungry. Very hungry. Across the hall, Vaughn leaned back in his chair again. He folded his arms. Wow, he said loudly. The human adopts a stray. A few weak laughs followed, but most students were simply watching, because something about the scene felt uncomfortable. A human kneeling beside a starving dragon girl, sharing his entire meal. No hesitation, no pride, just quiet kindness. I remember thinking something very specific at that moment. Humans are strange, very strange, and that was before the real problem walked into the hall. The doors at the far end suddenly opened. Heavy footsteps echoed across the floor. A group of armored academy enforcers entered. At their center stood a tall official wearing silver command plating. Director Karvek, and he was staring directly at Lira. His voice cut through the hall like a blade. There she is. The dragon girl froze. Food still in her claws. Karvek raised a datapad. Student Lira of the Draken Refuge. Pause. You are in violation of Union law regarding registered war species. The room went silent again. Owen slowly stood up beside her. Karvek continued. You have been ordered to report for containment testing. Lira's wings trembled. I didn't do anything. Karvek didn't care. You are a dragon. He gestured to the enforcers. Take her. And that was the exact moment the human made the worst decision possible. He stepped in front of her. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Director Karvek stood at the center of the hall, arms behind his back, looking very pleased with himself. The academy enforcers beside him held shock restraints ready. Cold metal cuffs designed for dangerous species. Behind the human, Lira had stopped eating. A piece of fruit was still in her claw. Her golden eyes were wide, confused, afraid. Now allow me to clarify something about academy politics. When a union director enters a hall with armed enforcers and says, take her, the expected response from students is very simple. Move out of the way, quietly, preferably fast. The human did not move. He simply stood there. Director Karvek frowned. You are obstructing an official action, he said. Owen looked at him calmly. Yeah, he replied. I figured that part out. Several students exchanged nervous looks. Humans had been part of a union for less than 20 cycles. Most of their behavior was still confusing. Karvek raised an eyebrow. Step aside. Owen glanced back at Lira. She looked small again, much smaller than before. Not a dragon, just a hungry student who had finally found food. He looked back at the director. No. Now that word traveled across the hall like a dropped plasma grenade. No shouting, no drama, just one quiet syllable. No. Director Karvek blinked slowly. I beg your pardon? Owen folded his arms. You heard me. Behind him, Lira whispered urgently. Owen, please. He didn't turn. Karvek's voice hardened. That creature is classified as a potential war species. Dragons once burned entire colonies. Owen shrugged slightly. That one just ate my bread. A few students coughed, trying not to laugh. The director did not appreciate the humor. His gaze sharpened. You will step aside? Now. Owen tilted his head. I have a question. Karvek sighed impatiently. You are in no position to ask questions. Owen ignored that. How many dragons are left? The director frowned. That information is restricted. Owen nodded slowly. So, not many. Silence. Owen gestured lightly toward Lira. She looks pretty dangerous. Lira froze. The hall held its breath. Then Owen added calmly. If you're a sandwich. A few snorts of laughter escaped from the tables. Carvek's patience finally snapped. Enough. He signaled the enforcers. Remove him. 2 armored officers stepped forward. And that is when I noticed something interesting. Lira's wings were shaking. Not with fear, with restraint. Dragons have instincts older than most civilizations. When threatened, they react. But she wasn't reacting. She was holding herself back. Because the human had told her to stay. Owen looked over his shoulder. Lira. She looked up. His voice was quiet. Finish your food. That sentence confused everyone in the hall, including the enforcers. Sir, one officer said, move aside. Owen turned back slowly. No. The officer reached for him. And that was the exact moment the situation became complicated. The human moved. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just one step forward. But it placed him directly between the enforcers and the dragon girl. The officer grabbed Owen's arm. Bad decision. Humans are strange creatures. Physically unimpressive compared to many galactic species. But their balance, leverage, and stubbornness are infamous among those who have studied them. Owen twisted his arm slightly. The officer lost his grip. Nothing dramatic. Just a small movement. But enough to send the message. I am not moving. Director Carvek's face darkened. You are interfering with union enforcement. Owen nodded. Seems that way. You will face legal consequences. Another nod. Probably. Carvek leaned forward. Why? The question echoed across the hall. Why defend a starving dragon nobody cared about? Why risk punishment? Why stand against the academy director? Owen looked down at the tray. Lira had stopped eating again. She was staring at the floor. He gently pushed the tray closer to her. Keep going, he said quietly. Then he looked back at the director. Because she was hungry. The silence that followed was heavy. Carvek stared at him as if the human had spoken nonsense. That is not a reason. Owen shrugged. Sure it is. The director gestured sharply. Seize them both. For enforcers stepped forward now. Weapons humming. Across the hall, students leaned back in their seats. No one wanted to be involved. Except, something unexpected happened. A chair moved. Then another. Then another. I looked around. Students were standing. Not many, but enough to be noticeable. A tall insectoid named Kilo stepped closer. Then a gray-skinned minor species student. Then, to my surprise, even one of Vaughn's own friends stepped away from his table. Vaughn looked confused. What are you idiots doing? Nobody answered. Director Carvek's eyes narrowed. Return to your seats. No one moved. Owen glanced around. Even he seemed surprised. He scratched the back of his head. Huh. Then he muttered quietly. Well, that's new. Lira slowly stood behind him. She had finished the tray. Every piece. Her wings unfolded slightly. Still small compared to ancient dragons, but large enough to cast a shadow across the table. The enforcers hesitated. Dragons may be poor now, but their reputation still carried weight. Carvek pointed at her. Control your creature. Owen laughed softly. Yep, about that. He stepped aside. Not away. Just enough that Lira stood beside him. Not behind him. Beside him. Her voice trembled slightly, but it was steady. I am not a weapon. Carvek scoffed. History says otherwise. Lira lifted her head, golden eyes glowing faintly. I came here to study navigation. Silence. Then Owen added casually. And she paid for lunch. The hall erupted in confused murmurs. Carvek stared. What? Owen pointed at the empty tray. She finished it. Pause. So technically that was a shared meal. Even I had to suppress a laugh. The director looked around the hall. Students were watching, waiting, judging. Union politics rely heavily on reputation. Dragging away a hungry dragon girl in front of witnesses after a human publicly defended her. That was not a good look. Carvek lowered his datapad slowly. This matter will be reviewed. Owen nodded politely. Cool. The director glared at Lira one last time. Then he turned. Stand down. The enforcers stepped back. A wave of relief moved through the hall. Carvek walked toward the exit. Before leaving, he paused. Human. Owen looked up. Carvek spoke coldly. You have made this situation very visible. Owen smiled slightly. Good. The doors closed. Silence remained for a moment. Then Dozens of conversations exploded at once. Students whispering, arguing, laughing nervously. Vaughn sat frozen at his table, completely ignored. Lira slowly looked at Owen. You didn't have to do that. He picked up the empty tray. Yeah. Pause. I know. She blinked. Why did you? Owen started walking back toward his table. He glanced over his shoulder. Because, he said casually, no one should have to fight an empire on an empty stomach. Lira stared at him. Then something very unusual happened. The dragon girl smiled. And I, Terrell of the Cricks, recorded that moment carefully. Because history often begins with very small events. A meal, a joke, a human who refused to move, and a dragon girl who was no longer alone. And in that moment, the galaxy learned the true strength of humanity. Not power, not weapons, but compassion.